I am Mansi Taneja from Economic Times Telecom. I have with me Dr. Thiaw Seng, Head of Strategic Network Evolution, Market Area Southeast Asia, Oceania and India, Ericsson. Welcome Dr. Seng. Let me start with 5G and its potential in India. You know, Indian operators have been aggressively launching 5G services in India. We have earned the tag of fastest 5G rollout. So how do you see 5G picking up in India? Barring FWA, we don't see any use cases that have picked up in India. What's your take on this?
Yep. I think first of all, thanks for inviting me, right? When it comes to the rollout in 5G for India, I think it's really impressive. It's, from globally, we see it's actually one of the fastest rollout on 5G till now, right? If you look at the rollout today, there are already more than 2 lakh of 5G base stations already rolled out. I think the first success is when you have a faster rollout. Those users actually having a 5G phone will have the coverage and it will actually help the adoption, right? I think this is the most important fundamental, that when we have a 5G network, the users should actually come to the 5G network and use the data in 5G network, right? Then it will actually give the opportunity for the operators to fill up the 5G network and get the ROI from the investment, right? So apart from adoption, then the next thing is how to make use of this 5G network that's already there. And one low-hanging fruit, which is the fixed wireless access, right? If you look at India, the home broadband penetration, it is still less than 10% today, right? There are still a lot of room to grow, so that they provide home broadband to most of the people and reduce the digital divide, right? Then people can do education, entertainment at home, right? So with the rollout on 5G in this very fast pace, we see that FWA is actually a big opportunity for India, right? Then the next thing, of course, what is next, right? So if we do a step back look at the learning from the global operators, all right, the next use case is actually come to the network slicing, right? So network slicing means operator is able to provide a slice to have a guaranteed user experience and also latency to the consumer, both the B2B and also B2C segment, right? Some example that we see actually quite successful globally in terms of network slicing is, for example, Singtel. During the F1 event, they actually launched a service called the CAS application, where the user actually can download application. The application can have multiple camera views on different corners on the F1 race, right? So subscribers subscribe to it, not only during the area you have a lot of people, you guarantee your user experience while you're watching the online video, and also you see different cameras, right? So this is a very successful use case. Then also the second use case we see, which is very successful, is in Taiwan, right? So Taiwanese operator Fireside actually offers slice to the police department, right? That actually the police department will actually have put a camera on top of the police car. Whenever the police car go, they actually do a car plate detection. Then send back to the police station to do to identify whether this car plate is actually a stolen car or not, right? So with the network slicing with the 5G network, is able to guarantee the uplink user experience on this video and improve the accuracy on this application, right? Another good use case is also live broadcast, like what we are doing today, right? Sometimes the broadcaster, they might get the last minute request to do a live broadcast. So if the network is able to provide a slice to guarantee uplink performance on good quality during the event on the broadcast, then they don't actually need to send the whole team to actually set up in a proper manner to do the live broadcast. So they can actually leverage on the 5G network with the camera on, then they can do broadcast on the fly, right? So we see that this sort of use case actually start to grow and become more matured, and I would say that has a potential to bring to India to leverage on the 5G network.
Right. That's very interesting. But since you talked about FWA, considering the Indian market, which is very cost sensitive, so and the price of CPEs is very high. So how do you see that shaping up going forward, and how do you think the prices will come down?
Yeah, if you look at the home broadband penetration in India, it is probably less than 10%, like I mentioned, right? So there are good opportunity to serve a different segment for this 90% sort of unconnected home broadband segment, right? Yeah. So learning from the global operators, how they launch it, they do a segmentation, right? It's based on speed base, right? So some segment, the willingness to pay is actually higher, right? Operator actually offer a higher price plan, right, than addressed to that segment, right? When come to the really rural, right, then operator actually can provide a lower price plan with the ARPU that their willingness to pay, right? So I would say that there are different segments to go. First, look at the segment that beyond this 10%, which is home broadband today, cover those which is urban and suburban area that the willingness to pay is actually higher. Then operator can offer a slightly higher price plan with a higher speed. Then you get an ROI based on whatever base station you have sort of deployed 5G base station. You have spare capacity. You reduce your upfront cost to introduce the FWA. Of course, with the slightly higher willingness to pay in this segment, it is the first segment to address. Yeah.
So you talked about FWA potential that's very high in India, but are there any numbers you can share with us, how fast it will grow in next couple of years?
Yeah. So Ericsson also do some study ourselves, right? So until end of last year, end of 2022, there is already 100 million FWA subscriber globally, right? So we forecast that this number will grow to 300 million household in 2028, and the potential revenue in globally in FWA segment is $67 billion globally, right? So we actually see in the next 5 years the number of connection will actually grow 3 times till 2028, right? Yeah. So it's a big potential. So there's a few examples that operators are really doing very well, right? So for those country which have the low home broadband penetration, for example, in Philippines, it's only 30%. They are able to grow another 15% on FWA to capture the home sort of penetration. In Oman, Oman home broadband today standing at the fiber, right, at 60%. They are able to capture another 50% more using FWA. So the low home broadband penetration segment, these two are the great example to learn from, right? But opportunity also not limit to low home broadband segment. It's also go into the high home broadband penetration, for example, US, right? So if you look at the report, T-Mobile actually already reported 2.6 million home broadband subscriber based on FWA, even though the home broadband penetration in US is already close to 100%, right? So the segment they actually address is those improving experience for those subscriber which only the DSL. So it's more like a DSL replacement towards the 5G FWA. It will give you a faster speed, a lower latency, right? And also a second segment they address is also the SME segment, right? So some business they might not want to sort of tie to some fiber plan for 2 years. With FWA, they can just purchase the box and try it out for 6 months. If a business success, they will continue on it. So SME segment is actually a big segment in US that they are addressing. Yeah.
So globally, what kind of improvements have the global operators seen after deploying FWA? And also, if you could briefly touch upon the monetization strategies of global telecom players, which can be replicated, in the Indian market.
Yeah. So in FWA offering, so we always refer to how much a sort of price premium on top of compared to the postpaid MBB, right? So typically we see operator charging a similar price on 4G when it comes to FWA compared to the price that they pay for postpaid MBB, right? When it comes to the 5G, because 5G is able to provide a higher speed, for example, some operators provide up to 100 megabit per second. In average, they're actually charging double the ARPU compared to the postpaid MBB, right? Some operators using more innovative solution, right? They start to provide the outdoor CPE, then actually able to boost the actual speed up to 500 megabit per second, right? So then they actually provide a substantial speed differentiation compared to whatever plan in the market. Then they're actually able to charge a higher ARPU, for example, 3 times higher ARPU compared to the postpaid MBB plan.
Right, right. So how do you see FWA picking up? You think it will be majorly for the retail consumers or enterprise will also lap up? You know, I'm talking about the Indian context.
Yeah. So I would say it will be both, right? So the B2C segment, which is address the home, since India is still low in home broadband, I think it is a great opportunity for to grow in this segment on the home broadband for consumer. And also, we also see there is a lot of SME actually required a stable connection, right? So there's also good opportunity to address the B2B segment, which address the small and medium enterprise. With FWA with higher speed, then it actually help to accelerate the digitalization on their workspace, and also helping in their business to get intelligence, to connect to the cloud, to access more data, right? So both segments is actually addressable.
So in terms of 5G use cases, when do you see Indian market picking up in a substantial way? Right now, when we speak to the operators, they say it's a very challenging phase. There's hardly any commercial use cases that's available, and the monetization is also another big challenge that they face. So how do you see the market picking up, especially 5G now that operators have invested so much in setting up their networks and infrastructure? So when do you think operators will be able to monetize 5G fully?
I think when it comes to you have a 5G network, I think the first ambition is to drive the 5G adoption, right? Since we invested, operator invested on the network, it's good to have users come in to consume the resources. Then most of the 4G traffic actually move to 5G, and the user experience is actually improved overall because 5G speed is faster. You offload on 4G get less congested, you get actually faster, right? That is a fundamental, right? Secondly is since it's the early days on the 5G, right? And network is probably quite empty now, and it's actually good to fill in with more fixed wireless access traffic, right? So fixed wireless access is actually the low-hanging fruit in terms of providing the next step of service, right? I would say after we harvest the 5G adoption and FWA, then network slicing is actually the next step to go and provide sort of guarantee service for certain segment. I would say that the healthcare segment is actually very promising, right? It's not only give the the mobile clinic in certain small town that you don't actually need to send the doctors to those sort of mobile hub, right? But using the 5G high-speed connection, those scanning and remote meeting with the doctors can happen. It's actually help to improve the healthcare overall in India, right? Mm-hmm. Then also the other segment is of course come back to the enterprise and the private sector, right? So what we are seeing that globally, for example, in manufacturing segment, that there are companies that already implement 5G into the factory. Even Ericsson actually implement the 5G in our own factory. Use cases like the remote AGVs, like we have a drone to do the asset tracking and inspection, remote troubleshooting with the AR/VR glasses, right? So these are the very good use case for manufacturing. So we actually see a few sort of big companies in manufacturing segment already implement 5G in Germany and in US, right? So it's a matter of time that this machine equipped with 5G devices will come to India, and operator can tap on to provide the connectivity and also the integration into this segment, right? So I would say that the low-hanging fruit is the 5G adoption plus the FWA. Then for the private network and the slicing, this will take time to come, but it's actually coming.
Yeah, and if we include the affordability factor also here, you know, the price of smartphones, 5G smartphones is still beyond many Indians. So, and the cost of CPEs, if we take both together, as in the proposition becomes very high. So, again, when do you see and how do you see the cost coming down in both the segments?
So, the smartphone is actually coming down very quickly, right? So, we actually see smartphone actually $100 or some is less than $100 start to appear in the market, right? So that will actually address the middle class and also start to appear also in the rural segment, right? So smartphone, I think, is getting really good, right? When it comes to fixed wireless access, the CPE currently, some may claim that it's still high, right? But it's running at $150 today, and there are evolution on technology actually looking at it. For example, the industry is looking at maybe in some of the rural segment, you don't need 100 megahertz of spectrum. You might get a lesser spectrum, but still provide a very good quality of service. But in turn, it will actually reduce the chipset price and the CPE price, right? So I would say that technology has once new chipset has actually introduced. In 1 or 2 years, we will see the CPE price will come down substantially.
So going back to the mobile broadband, you think that will pick up fast enough, or compared to the fiber connectivity, or both the technologies will complement each other and coexist? How do you see that scenario?
I would say that it will complement to each other, right? So the first the segment to address, probably if you already have the fiber, then that is not the segment that you want to quickly introduce fixed wireless on that segment, right? For example, fiber is actually a fringe out to a city, right? Then and there is the next layer that is not covered by the fiber. But these are probably the urban area that people wanted a stable internet, that they wanted a high-speed broadband. This is definitely the segment to be addressed first with fixed wireless access, right? So probably in 1 or 2 years' time, the fiber will reach those areas. At least it gives opportunity for CSP to address fast time to market, to capture that segment first, address the need of the people before the fiber come. When the fiber come, then they can sort of either they continue with fixed wireless access or you actually convert into fiber, right?
So we've been talking mainly about 5G and the adoption in India. So what's next? What's your plans on 6G and 5G advanced? What's Ericsson doing globally for this?
So 6G is definitely the hot topic, right? So but before actually coming to 6G, there's another step called 5G advanced, right? We're talking about 3GPP release 18, 19 and beyond, right? So a few technology in 5G advanced that the industry is actually looking at is, first is of course continue to improve the speed and efficiency in terms of massive MIMO and this technology. Second is of course start to look at the coverage everywhere. So it's leveraging on the satellite connection where the 5G will be sort of being used and provided by the satellite company as well. And the third thing, of course, to continue, like you rightly mentioned, reduce the cost on the phone and the CPE and also devices connect to the industry, right? So a new technology called the reduced capability, or we call it the rate cap, right? It's actually simplified the modulation, simplified the bandwidth needed for the devices, right? So that's enhancement on that, and also some capability like positioning, V2X. This our technology is actually come into the 5G advanced, right? Once all these are matured, then we are talking about what is next actually needed in a few years' time, right? The use case that we see is, besides mobile broadband, fixed wireless access, we will see the smart city has also become one of the major use case, especially in city like Delhi and Mumbai, right? Where you might see a lot of cameras connect for public safety, for security reason, right? That will actually generate a lot of traffic, right? So that's our application. We actually create a lot of data and demand for more spectrum and more efficient handling of this data is needed, right? So the first step before we actually talk about 6G is what spectrum actually needed for 6G, right? So the industry talking about having the 6 gigahertz for 5G and probably looking at harmonizing the industry to have the 7 to 15 gigahertz spectrum for 6G, where there are some forum like WRC 23 and 27. A new spectrum might be bring up to harmonize on all countries that, okay, we need a new spectrum for 6G, right? When it comes to the technology advancement towards 6G, I think what is lagging in 5G is addressing those low power, wide area type of application. Today is still very much rely on narrowband IoT to have those low power, wide area application to be narrowband IoT to be coexist with 5G, right? So in 6G, we are talking about probably with a zero energy device. A device is able to harvest the energy from the base station on the surrounding so that they get enough power to send a certain byte, bit and byte back to the base station, right? So 6G, we're targeting not only continue to enhance the experience, but provide coverage everywhere, right? And also addressing the low energy devices.
Right, right. So the last question is, how do you see Indian market, for Ericsson globally? It has been an important and growing fast, but if you can also share some numbers, how well is India performing for Ericsson?
Yep. I think definitely India is the very important market for Ericsson, right? We have more than 50% market share for 5G today. And in order to accelerate it, we will also have a 5G factory, right, in Pune. Most of the sort of equipment is actually come from this factory, is made in India, right? Globally, I think within last year and this year, the rollout of 5G is definitely very, very impressive in India, and it's actually deliver the most actually radios globally for Ericsson as well, right? So it's definitely a very important market for Ericsson.
Great, great. That's very insightful discussion. Thank you for joining us.
Yeah, thank you very much.